In 2026, the United States, the world's largest economy, was entering its most frightening silent crisis since the Great Depression of the 1930s. And as the economy began to crack, one thing kept rising alongside unemployment, debt, and despair: prostitution. The first people pushed to the edge were often women. Single mothers unable to pay rent. College students forced to quit school as living costs exploded. Nurses working night shifts. Office workers who once had stable lives. Until only months into the downturn, everything started collapsing. Under the cold neon lights of major cities, more and more women were trading their bodies simply to buy food, pay rent, or find a place to sleep for the night. The most terrifying part was that most of them never imagined they would end up there. Economic collapse does not only destroy bank accounts. It destroys dignity, relationships, and people's sense of security. As prices rise, jobs disappear, and bills continue piling up, many are forced to choose between survival and self-respect. At the same time, millions of Americans are slowly losing the place they once called home. And this time, the victims are not only the poor. Among them are teachers, firefighters, laid-off software engineers, and families where both parents work full-time yet still cannot survive. There are no gunshots, no bombs, only cars turned into bedrooms, tent camps growing in the middle of cities, and more people being pushed into society's darkest corners just to stay alive. This is not only a story about prostitution or homelessness. It is the story of an America quietly collapsing from within. And perhaps the most disturbing part is that this may only be the beginning. The numbers alone are terrifying. America now has more than 771,000 homeless people, and the figure continues to rise. In 2024, homelessness increased by 18%, the largest jump in modern U.S. history. California alone recorded more than 221,000 homeless people, with many forced to sleep outside without shelter. What worries experts even more is that the crisis is no longer limited to major cities. It is spreading into small towns and quiet rural states like Vermont and Maine, where homelessness in some areas has surged by more than 150% within just a few years. But the biggest shock is this: the fastest growing group losing their homes is not young people. It is adults over 55. People who should be resting after a lifetime of work are now sleeping inside their own cars. And the most frightening part is that the numbers still do not reveal the full reality, because the most invisible homeless people are often the ones nobody notices. Forget the old image of a homeless man begging on the street. In America in 2026, the homeless person could be the same worker who served your coffee this morning. Around 40 to 60% of homeless Americans still have jobs. During the day, they stock supermarket shelves, clean hotel rooms, and work in restaurants. But at night, they sleep in cars, temporary shelters, or beneath bridges. Ironically, they are still the people keeping society running every day. Another group America rarely talks about is military veterans. About 1 in 10 homeless people once served in the armed forces. Many returned from Iraq or Afghanistan carrying both physical and emotional scars. Yet what waited for them at home was sometimes not gratitude, but a tent on the sidewalk. Among the homeless are also retired teachers, nurses, and city workers. Their lives did not collapse overnight. Sometimes a single illness, a lost job, or an overdue bill was enough to drag everything into ruin. But perhaps the most heartbreaking reality is homeless women. They make up nearly 40% of the homeless population, yet many remain unseen because the streets are too dangerous. Some sleep in cars, constantly move from place to place, or stay in abusive relationships simply to survive the night. And many of them are single mothers. More than 80% of homeless families with children in the United States are led by single mothers. With wages too low and rent too high, thousands of children are growing up in cars or cheap motels. A child waking up in a freezing parking lot rarely gets a normal childhood. At the same time, homelessness among women over 50 is rapidly increasing. Many spent their lives caring for families, only to lose everything after divorce, widowhood, or financial collapse. Some are already grandmothers, yet still sleep alone in dark parking lots. Workers, veterans, children, the elderly. This is no longer the failure of individuals. It is the sign of a system beginning to fracture from within. And in today's America, the distance between having a home and losing everything is far thinner than most people imagine. The middle class is also quietly sliding toward the edge. In the past, people believed only major disasters could make someone homeless. But in modern America, a broken car, a medical bill, or even one missed paycheck can be enough to destroy an entire life. 6 out of 10 Americans now live paycheck to paycheck. And the terrifying part is that these are often not the poor, but the middle class itself. Many people who appear financially stable are actually only one crisis away from homelessness. Most shocking of all, there is now no U.S. state where a full-time minimum wage worker can afford a 2-bedroom apartment. The gap between income and housing costs has become so extreme that it is almost impossible to close. The irony is that this crisis is often worst in America's richest and fastest growing cities. Luxury towers continue rising higher. Real estate prices keep exploding. Yet the very people who keep these cities functioning, nurses, drivers, sanitation workers, can no longer afford to live where they work. The wealthier the city becomes, the further ordinary workers are pushed away. And as the middle-class safety net slowly disappears, even the smallest mistake can send someone falling before they realize it. At the center of the crisis is housing. For decades, Americans believed rent should never exceed 30% of income. But in cities like Los Angeles or New York City, even full-time minimum wage workers now spend more than half their income just to rent a tiny apartment. That old rule has almost vanished. Meanwhile, working-class neighborhoods are demolished to make room for luxury apartments and expensive cafes. The people who lived there for decades are pushed out, losing not only their homes, but also the communities they once belonged to. America is now short more than 7 million affordable homes. For every 3 people searching for housing, only one can find a place they can truly afford. The others are left surviving in cars, cheap motels, or on the streets. From 2020 to 2024, rent prices surged by more than 30% nationwide, with some areas seeing increases above 50%. But wages barely moved. That widening gap is crushing millions of families. At the same time, large investment firms have quietly bought hundreds of thousands of homes, turning housing into a financial asset instead of a basic human necessity. The crisis became even worse after many mental health institutions across America were shut down during the 1980s. Promised community support systems were never fully built. Millions of vulnerable people were left untreated, unsupported, and slowly pushed toward the bottom of society. A terrifying pattern is now repeating across the country. Every time average rent rises by roughly $100 a month, homelessness in that area increases sharply soon after. This is no longer coincidence. It is a chain reaction unfolding in real time. And then came the rise of America's tent cities. Across the country, homeless camps now stretch beneath highways, inside parks, and along sidewalks. By 2026, these tent communities had become a common sight in cities nationwide. The most disturbing reality is that some children are now being born and raised inside these camps. If you look at New York City today, you can see how deeply the crisis has changed America. It was once called the city that never sleeps. But now, tens of thousands remain awake for a darker reason, because they have nowhere safe to rest. Night after night, they wander through subway stations, parks, and freezing sidewalks, until scenes that once shocked the public slowly become normal. In Los Angeles, the situation has become even more extreme. Some homeless areas have grown so large they resemble entire communities of their own. Yet only a few streets away stand luxury mansions and symbols of wealth. In San Francisco, the contrast feels even more painful. On one side is the heart of the tech industry, home to trillion-dollar companies. On the other are tens of thousands of people struggling just to survive another day. The city spends billions trying to solve homelessness, yet the tent camps remain. In many places, the crisis is also tied to drugs. Some people began with nothing more than prescription painkillers after surgery, before addiction slowly took control. Once they lost their jobs, homes, and health insurance, the road back became almost impossible. But many cities respond to the problem by simply cleaning it up. Tent camps are removed, and homeless people are pushed elsewhere, especially before major public events. They do not disappear. They are only moved out of sight. And weeks later, everything returns again. What makes this so chilling is how much it resembles the Great Depression of the 1930s. The difference is that today, the American economy is still growing. The stock market continues soaring, and the wealthy are becoming richer than ever. Yet tent cities keep spreading across the country. And perhaps the most frightening part of the crisis is the homeless people nobody sees. Around 6 out of 10 homeless Americans now live in cars, temporary rooms, or on friends' couches. They are not sleeping on sidewalks, but they still have no real home. During the day, they work, socialize, and appear normal like everyone else. But behind that normal appearance is a life hanging by a thread. In states like Michigan, cities may still look stable on the surface, while thousands secretly sleep inside freezing cars during winter nights. When temperatures fall below zero, homelessness stops being hardship and becomes a fight for survival. Some people die silently inside their vehicles, without anyone noticing. Another heartbreaking reality is that more than 1.4 million American children are homeless. Many grow up in cheap motels, back seats of cars, or relatives' homes. Entire generations are being raised without truly understanding what a home feels like. And when night falls, new dangers appear. Homeless people do not only fear the cold, they fear other people. Robbery, violence, and exploitation can happen at any moment when you do not even have a door to lock behind you. The irony is that many people see the homeless as a threat to society. But in reality, they are often the most vulnerable. Homeless individuals are far more likely to be assaulted, robbed, or even killed than ordinary citizens. Which means the numbers we see may still hide a much darker reality. Every year, the United States spends tens of billions of dollars on the homelessness crisis. Cities open more shelters, create task forces, and hire consultants. Yet the number of homeless people continues to rise. The problem is that much of the current system is designed to manage homelessness, not truly end it. Most funding goes toward temporary shelters and emergency responses instead of permanent housing. As a result, many people become trapped in a cycle, from the streets to shelters, then hospitals or jails, and eventually back to the streets again. Some cities have taken an even harsher approach by criminalizing homelessness itself. Sleeping outdoors, living in cars, or setting up tents can lead to fines or arrest. But once someone has unpaid penalties or a criminal record, finding stable housing becomes even harder. Ironically, this approach is also far more expensive. The cost of policing, emergency healthcare, and repeated arrests for one homeless person can exceed the cost of simply providing permanent housing and support services. Society is spending more money for solutions that work far less effectively. There is also another uncomfortable truth. Some industries profit from the crisis. Private shelters, security companies, and management contracts generate enormous revenue, while relatively little money is invested in long-term housing solutions. In many ways, the system survives by continuing the crisis rather than solving it. Meanwhile, homeless people are often treated as obstacles to urban development. Once camps are cleared away, property values in those areas frequently rise. Sometimes cleaning up the streets becomes not only a social policy, but also an economic strategy. What makes this even more striking is that solutions already exist. During the pandemic, when the government expanded rental assistance and paused evictions, homelessness dropped significantly in many areas. That proved the crisis is not impossible to solve. The real question is whether there is enough political will to do it. Yet despite the darkness, there are still rare signs of hope. California was long seen as the center of America's homelessness crisis. But recently, the number of unsheltered homeless people there has started to decline for the first time in more than 15 years. Authorities began purchasing old hotels and motels, converting them into permanent housing for thousands of people. But perhaps the most impressive example is Houston. Over little more than a decade, the city reduced homelessness by more than 60% using one simple philosophy: housing first. The idea was straightforward: give people stable housing before trying to solve employment, addiction, or mental health problems. And surprisingly, that simple approach proved far more effective than many older systems. If we look beyond the United States, the picture becomes even clearer. Finland, a country with a far colder climate, has nearly eliminated homelessness within little more than a decade. Their philosophy was simple: housing is a basic human right, not a reward only for those considered worthy. The common factor in every successful example is that they did not try to merely manage homelessness. They focused on returning people to real homes. And that proves something important. This crisis is not impossible to solve. The real question is whether society truly wants to solve it. Right now, somewhere in America, there are families preparing to spend another night sleeping inside a car. Veterans counting coins just to afford breakfast. Single mothers teaching in classrooms while hiding exhaustion behind tired eyes. Children keeping their school books inside motel rooms so classmates will never know they are homeless. These are not statistics. They are human beings. And in many cases, they are only one crisis, one decision, or one missed paycheck away from where millions of others already are. Officially, the United States has more than 771,000 homeless people. But the true number may be far higher. The country still lacks over 7 million affordable homes. 6 out of 10 Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and more than 1 million children are growing up without stable housing. This is not only a story about people living on the streets. It reflects what society chooses to tolerate and what it chooses to ignore. Homeless people are not weak or fundamentally different from everyone else. They are simply less protected. And most importantly, this crisis does have solutions. California has recently shown signs of improvement. Houston dramatically reduced homelessness, and Finland nearly eliminated it altogether. The missing piece is not strategy, it is determination. So the final question is not whether homelessness can be solved. The real question is whether society is finally willing to solve it. This is not the failure of individuals. It is the sign of a system beginning to fracture from within. And because people created that system, people also have the power to change it. If this story made you think, share your perspective in the comments. And if you want to continue exploring the hidden realities shaping our world, follow the channel and join the next journey. Goodbye, and see you in the next story.